Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck with me, John Ferguson. Well, it is now the Monday when I'm recording this. I'm going to be putting it out after the Wallabies lose the second test and the series to the British and Irish Lions after a thriller at the MCG. And can I just say, it was a awesome game of rugby. It really was, and we are so lucky to be living in a time where 90,000 people flood into the MCG and truly make it a spectacle, which I think Rugby Australia really outdid themselves at the event by all accounts of people there. I'd just like to say a big congratulations to the British and Irish Lions. You were a phenomenal side throughout the entire tour, and I know that we have one more game to go, so we will obviously get into that later in the week, but for now it's just about reviewing this game. And it is a tough pill to swallow. Obviously a little bit more emotionally detached from it now than I was on Saturday night and kind of went on a bit of a hiatus. But we're going to get into all the analysis, all the tactics, all the key moments, all the key players from both sides. And although we have a little bit of a heavy focus on the Wallabies, we definitely do speak about the Lions because they won that game. I'm not saying that the Wallabies lost that game. That was a phenomenal effort from the British and Irish Lions and some of their key players. So well played to them. I'd also just like to say that if you get value from the channel, please do remember to hit subscribe down below. That's how you really do support the channel and do support me doing the work here on the channel to be able to then get through to more rugby lovers like yourself. So hit the subscribe, hit the notification button, and give it a thumbs up if you get some value from the chat. So today we're actually going to be chatting to Ando and Mitch from the Scrumbags Pod. We're going to get them on, so we're going to head into that interview in just a second. And I hope that you guys get what you need out of it. And then later in the week, we're going to do a defensive analysis video on the Wallabies, where they're going wrong, and we're going to be having a little bit of a closer look at Joseph Akuso Suaalii, so stay tuned for that. But until now, let's get straight into the interview.
I just wanted to throw to both of you gents who have joined me, how is your Sunday going? How are you feeling? I know we all live and die by the rugby results, and it was not in our favour last night.
Mate, my mood has been lower today. I have struggled to be as positive. It's just been a really down day, in all truthfulness. This is not going to be a happy, cheerful pod, I think, fam. So I've been finding it really hard. John, you were mentioning a bit of a 12-hour stepping away from all things rugby to try and cleanse your soul.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Just before off air, I mentioned that. And I think it's just because there were so many good parts of that game that we genuinely, as Wallabies supporters and rugby lovers, thought there was a time there when we were effectively untouchable because it was such a huge lead. And then for that all to come crashing down in the last minute, it was a storied ending, but it was just in the way that it happened. It just came at such the very last gasp. And I think that's really what the sucker punch was. So I had to take myself away. I've thought about the game all day, which I'm very keen to share with you guys and the listeners and the watchers on YouTube. But it was quite hard for me. I haven't been that quiet after a loss in a while. And it's because I think I was so impressed in parts in it. So it was the roller coaster of emotions as opposed to just the petering out, which made it more difficult.
That's a very nice segue. Thank you, John. So let's get into what was the game. There was Test 2 between the British and Irish Lions and the Wallabies, played at a packed MCG stadium last night. Final score was 29-26 to the British and Irish Lions. If you haven't seen the game, I'm not sure why you're listening to the podcast, so I think we all know what happened. The Wallabies led for 79 minutes, and the Lions scored in the last 30 seconds to take the lead and to win the game, to take the series as well. Heartbreaking for the Wallabies. Gents, I think most people that are listening to this podcast have one topic they want to talk about, and that is that decision. That last breakdown, Carlo Tizzano cleared out, high contact to the head. What's doing?
I'll start, and I won't use all my powder straight away. I'll keep some of it dry. I thought it was really telling that Morgan Tiranui within the Stan Sport coverage, who in my mind is probably the best on-air analyst of the game, he was quite scathing of the decision to be made. And even during the coverage, they were putting up the relevant law that was applicable at this point in time to that contact, which was 9.20 which speaks to foul play with contact being, quote, above shoulders, end quote. And no matter what way you look at it, the contact on Carlo Tizzano in that ruck was on his neck. Now, it's arguable about whether it was on his head, but definitely neck. And with that point in mind, it's foul play. It is foul play. And I found the justification that the referee provided about both players arriving at the ruck simultaneously not only hard to swallow, but also factually incorrect. Tizzano was there earlier. His hands were on the ball. His body was in an excellent jackling shape over the ball. And you cannot have that shape if you are there at the same time as another player, because they'd be preventing you from getting into that position in the first place. So there was a lot that I found really, really difficult to handle. And the fact that Morgan Turinui and then Joe Schmidt afterwards were providing the clear justification and evidence for the challenging nature of that decision, made it, it was quite telling throughout. So, John, that's my starting point, mate. Why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, I obviously felt it at a very emotional level, just like you lads did. But coming at it from a journalistic and analytical perspective, I really liked the way that Joe Schmidt handled that question in the press conference, and you've already mentioned it, Ando. He cited the law that now I'm not. Joe Schmidt's going to forget more about rugby than I'll ever know, so I'm not going to cite the exact law. It's 9.2 point something.
9.2.0, 9.20 section B. I've got it up in front of me.
There we go. Ando's got it in front of him, so that I'm not going to steal the gunpowder from him there. I'm sure he's going to go into it later, but it's more so the way that he carried himself and argued. And I think that what I was feeling before the game was that perhaps Joe Schmidt hasn't been fiery enough about the height of the contest. But I come from a background where words are very important in my family, and that's the way that I was brought up. And his ability to articulate that argument in that press conference under fire and to be able to provide examples, that is his version of being fired up. We have never seen him yell. We have never seen him scream. We've seen him be stern, and we've seen him be into his players, but to the public, very, very controlled. And that's about as uncontrolled as I've seen him. And so in that moment, when I saw that press conference and his ability to deal with that situation, as all the facts that Ando has laid in front of us about what happened, the fact that he decided that Carlo did arrive before him. If you watched the vision, that there was contact to the neck, that he cites that the entire zeitgeist around the refereeing world, that there is supposed to be safety as one of the paramount parameters about making decisions. I just thought that Joe Schmidt was so tremendously well-spoken that I felt quite happy with how he fought for the Wallabies in that moment. And I'm sure he said very, very compelling things to his men after the full-time whistle. But it was nonetheless such a hard pill to swallow, because you could see how gutted Harry Wilson was, who was pretty much in tears on coverage, which I've never seen before from a captain after a loss like that. Only after wins, we saw Tane Edmund beating the Crusaders, etc. But it was honestly something that I think, tens of thousands of Australians felt around Australia, if not millions. And then obviously the players were absolutely gutted. That was shades of World Cup 2023. Not for the reason that it was embarrassing, but for the fact that they gave their all. And I truly felt that. So I'm extremely proud of the Wallabies, but we will get into some performance in a second. But that was my initial take on that entire scenario with the last tackle, clean out, and then try to Hugo Keenan, as Ando was talking about.
I guess what this also feeds into is we're very honed in on this one moment within the game. And as we get into the broader discussion of the game, I'm not sure if you want to go there now, if we'll get there, we are not claiming that the Wallabies lost the game solely because of that one tackle. At least I'm not. I'm personally claiming that that decision was wrong and the Wallabies should have had that penalty. But at the same time, they shouldn't have put themselves in a position after being, 23-5 up, where they are needing a decision in the 79th minute of the game to go their way to be able to win. So, yeah, there's a bit more nuance in there, but just fundamentally that decision was wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah. John, is there anything you wanted to say, any finishing comments on this? The only other thing
I think I just want to piggyback off what Ando said, and I think that there's so much more to talk about in the game where the Wallabies lost this. And again, I'm glad that you point this out, Ando, because the Wallabies didn't concede, had a reverse script of last week where we just blew out in the back half where we had a strong first half. You can't have that at the top level. And had we had a 70-minute performance, 60-minute performance, we wouldn't have been in that situation. But we got absolutely blown off the park in the second half. And I think that's, Mitch, where I think we should take the conversation, because that's where people are actually, after the initial blow of this one decision, want to get to.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's a really good segue there. So let's get into that. So at one point in the game, I don't have the timeline in front of me, but the Wallabies were leading the British and Irish Lions 23 points to 5. And they go into the half. That was in the first half. They go in at halftime 23-17. So the Lions were able to score 2 quick tries to get back in the contest. And then they were only able to score 3 points in the second half to go to 26. Like you just said there, John, kind of an opposite, like a flip of script, really, from what we saw last week, with a poor opening 40 minutes and a good finishing 40. This week, we started really well, and we sort of took our foot off the accelerator a little bit in that second half. What do you think were some of the decisions or the reasons why the Wallabies weren't able to keep that pressure up in the second 40?
Personnel was a massive part of the equation. So losing Alan Altoa, losing James Slipper, then having to swap Valetini with Gleeson at halftime, and then only getting 7 minutes in the second half, or 8 minutes out of Will Skelton. Those changes showed that Australia didn't have the right players on the bench, and because I actually fundamentally believe that we have the right players in our ecosystem to be those players to come off the bench. But I know this is quick, we're doing revision, but I'm also doing like preview into TRC. That right there is where performances matter for future selections. And there are players that played last night, which I'm sure we'll get into, because I want to keep this part of my chat brief and feedback to you guys, that honestly need to do a hell of a lot of work, in my opinion, to be able to garner a starting spot, let alone a bench spot. Because it's not that they played terribly, they just got outdone, and it's now happened 2 weeks in a row, some 3 games in a row now, stretching back to the Fiji game. So it's just, we are such a good unit when we're on fire. We were scoring tries from 60 meters out, but I know that you asked me about the moments, but I just feel like we have to have this conversation about the game of two halves in a broader chat before we get into it. And I'll feed it back to you guys now. But there were players which clearly struggled in quite big chunks in that game.
Endo, who do you think comes to mind when John says that?
I think, and this is harsh because he goes to the coffee shop around the corner from mine, but Jeremy Williams probably wasn't the type of player that we needed coming off the bench in the second half of a deciding Lions test. I think he is a like-for-like replacement for Nick Frost, or you put somebody else on the bench. And so either Nick Frost or Jeremy Williams is starting, and then you have someone like a Lukan Sakailoto who's on the bench. Mm-hmm. We've seen over the tour games that Lukan has put himself out there as a bit of an enforcer role, particularly within the Indigenous match. He was excellent. And I think that he probably would have been able to back up for like a 30 minute appearance within this game, despite having played about a week ago or 5 days ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know his fitness. I don't know the details there, but he's the type of more abrasive player that I think we needed, because what we clearly saw was a challenge of gain line ascendancy within that second half. So when we lost Bobby Valetini at the end of the first half because he was starting to tighten up again, and so Langy Gleeson was brought on. Like, Gleeson did pretty well with some of his runs, but he's not Bobby Valetini. And then Will Skelton, again, kind of coming back from injury, was Herculean in his 48 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yep. But when he came off, we again saw that challenge, and we didn't have people that could replace him. And I also just want to quickly comment on along this line, commentary of gain line ascendancy. I think that there needs to be just some mentoring and support needed for Harry Wilson in the choices that he's making when running the ball up. I think too often he's used as a first choice ball runner when his runs are actually quite almost like overly direct and overly straight line runs, almost like rugby league. And in union, you're just going to get two tackled and absolutely smash back. So you'll see players like Bobby Valentini or Will Skelton, their main thing is to try and get a soft shoulder and get their upper body through the tackle and then over the line of the tackle before they're then looking to recycle the ball. Whereas that's not the approach that Wilson typically takes. And so it means that either he gets ascendancy or he gets driven back.
Yep.
And we weren't within that second half with the changes that were made. I understand changes had to be made. Injuries, they were both Skelton and Bobby were coming back. But why aren't we using Angus Bell more as a first up ball runner? Why aren't we using Langy Gleeson more? It just seemed to be within the last 30 minutes of that second half, there was either Len Iketel or Harry Wilson as the first phase ball runner, and neither of those were being effective within those moments. So bench composition has a lot to play within that, but I also think decision making and just some of the way that our players were going about their business in the second half needed some evaluation or review as well.
Just on the Harry Wilson topic there, I think one thing that we've seen through his season at the Reds the past few years is what he's effective as is he gets through the line and he doesn't so much break the line and create like a line break like Will Skelton or Langy Gleeson or Valetini does. But what he does is he can get the ball free in the contact. And that's where we see he's effective when he offloads to someone like Fraser McWright or Tate McDermott, who then takes off and finishes off the line break. What he wasn't doing this week, or what the Lions were doing well, is that once he'd break the line, they'd either stop his momentum and then wrap the ball up. And so what the Wallabies were doing is we were relying, particularly in that first half, and why we look so good is because we had Valetini and Skelton who were breaking the line and they were making gain line and they'd break the line and go to ground and we'd play quick ruck ball. But what they weren't doing was playing quickly off that. They weren't recycling and then offloading or popping off the ground, which is what Wilson does at the Reds. And so when in the second half we were relying on Wilson to be that line runner, to break the line, he wasn't breaking the line. And therefore then he was being ineffectual, like you said there, Endo.
But I mean, a lot of that comes down to the quality of the Lions' defence throughout the first two games. Like, they've been excellent. We can talk about issues and areas for improvement within the Wallabies and refereeing decisions, but a lot of the challenges that the Wallabies have had is just from the speed of the British and Irish Lions rush attack, particularly the first kind of 2-3 off the ruck, and the pressure that's been putting on our players to then either work through around that, over that. And in the first game, we didn't have the bodies to go through that. In the first half of this match, we had the bodies to go through their defence. Yep. Didn't have that in the second.
And how much better did the Wallabies look as a unit, as a team, once we had that front foot ball?
Oh my God, it was amazing.
Pretty evident looking back over the last two tests and even potentially the last maybe 5, when you consider the English tour or the Northern Hemisphere tour at the end of last year, that Joe Schmidt's game plan relies on a big ball carrier breaking the ad line. And
which rugby team doesn't?
Yeah, but when we don't have that, we can't do anything. Our backs look stifled. They don't go forward. We just go backwards. And the Lions just pounced on us all week last week. The first half this week, we had that. But then it eats into it moves into that question of selection. So, and we'll talk about it in a second, but why do we not have more ball punchers on the bench who are going to come and bring that impact? We only had 1 coming on this week, 2 if you include Gleeson. But Angus Bell didn't really bring his ball carrying game. John, you've been nodding along. I'm sure you've got some points to throw in here.
Yeah, no, I just think that looking at the pack more broadly, you definitely saw. You just have to tip your hat to Skelton and Valetini. They did exactly what a lot of us thought they would, but I also think people largely undervalued or didn't appreciate how well they would do. And if you're Ronan O'Gara right now, you're either a freaking genius and you're slow and you're kind of slyly tipping Australia for a win then because you just wanted to get Skelton's back up. But I tell you what, Skelton didn't need 5 games to get revved up for that one. He was dominant. He was aggressive. He was absolutely all over the Lions. And in every contact and every ruck, he made them feel that they were part of a test match. And I'm sorry, but Ronan O'Gara, you're wrong. You were absolutely wrong about that, and I'm happy to say that to him and I'm sure he would admit it, because that was not 5 games, and that is some of the best I've ever seen Skelton play in a Wallabies jersey, and that was against the best of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. So, Will Skelton, welcome back to the Wallabies. We love having you here. You are absolutely worth every cent, and everyone who says that Skelton is overrated, you're dreaming, because he took on the Lions pack almost single-handedly. And then Bobby Valentini. You do not get to be labelled and feared by other teams around the world without being consistently one of the best ball runners. And he proved that with tremendous post-contact meters and tremendous ability. So those two players, I cannot overstate how crucial they were to the Wallabies game last night. But it's the impetus that they provided. It is the removal of inertia. So once you get one carry from Valentini and then you get one carry from Skelton, all of a sudden defenses fail to fold. They have to retreat an extra step. With a little bit of rain at the MCG, a little bit looser underfoot, you've got to actually dig in a little bit harder, and it's harder to accelerate off the D line when you're coming off in a rush defense that is as aggressive as the Lions was. So I don't want people to underappreciate how impactful those players were, because the attention that they drew to themselves, usually more than 2 tacklers, and then also what that meant for, as you guys highlighted, the backs of the Wallabies to be able to get front football. And that allows Harry Wilson to pick off lone tacklers to be able to get passes through or to be able to get his body through. But just saying this now, Harry Wilson at test level is not good enough to be the big dog in that pack. He is a great, great part. He is a great puzzle piece, and he definitely hasn't played as good as he's needed to in the last couple of games. But I'm not scrapping his selection, but I just think that he is the big dog at Super Rugby level, but the step up to test just means that he's just not that person, because we've seen it now over 3 tests. It's just not like that. Even against Fiji, he wasn't dominant. He actually managed to get the tip balls on, which gave other people the slick hands to be able to make the break. So I think that's the pack. But in the back line, if you want to talk about people who conceded points or conceded territory, you are looking at the person getting paid millions of dollars in the 13 jersey, Joseph Akuso Suaalii. I'll get your guys' take before I go, because I've been speaking for a bit now. I'm sorry. But that, aside from that one try assist, that was a pretty darn ordinary performance. He was busy, but that is a big problem that we cannot take into the TRC.
I personally think that his selection at 13 is just wrong. I don't think he should be in that centre channel. And we saw that on Saturday because the Lions just continually targeted that 13 channel and were trying to just force him to make decisions. And it's challenging. It's really difficult for a guy who's somewhat new to rugby union on a professional level, was injured for a large chunk of the Super Rugby season, and is now up against, as you mentioned, the 4 best players from, well, you know what I'm saying. And so I just think it was really, really difficult for him. And I actually think that simplifying his role as a 14 or as an 11 actually is a better opportunity. And then you have, say, a Paisami and Ikitau centre combination who are tried, tested, and know what to do at this level. And that, in my mind, would have been a better combination. Mitch, thoughts?
Yeah, the hardest thing for Joseph Akuso Suaalii, like, he's got the raw talent. We know what he can do. And that try that he set up for Tom Wright is just pure attacking from nothing. He got around 3 players, had no right to break the line like he did, but he did, and finished it off beautifully. That's him at his best. But he just has not had the prep time. He had such a disrupted Super Rugby season. He's playing fullback, he's playing centre. I think he played 3 or 4 games at most of centre in Super Rugby Pacific before being named there for the Wallabies. Like, this is not the prep that he needed. He needed to have a solid season without injury to cement his spot, to really get that transition from league. And it's gone to show that he wasn't ready for it. I think looking back on it, it probably wasn't the right decision. I mean, who knows? He could have gone there and excelled. So you can't really argue that Joe Schmidt made the wrong decision. But in hindsight, maybe it would have been better to see him shift to the wing, take a little bit of that pressure off him to get into the game a little bit more one-on-one space with attackers and defenders. Then when he's in the centres, it's congested. They know, the Lions know that every time he gets the ball, they send 2 or 3 players to put him on his butt. Like it didn't work.
I also
Hey,
just
play
want
him at 11. Just play him at 11. Give him the license to roam.
I mean, where did we
And
play Falau
back, done.
in the first 2 Lions tests? 11.
Wing. Yep.
I think it's important for me to just say that I am not anti-Suaalii at all. I think he's a phenomenal player. I'm so happy that he's part of the Wallabies setup, and then he's decided to come to Union. And I think he's a phenomenal raw talent and an extremely amazing athletic specimen. It's just, unfortunately, we are talking about the biggest game in Australia in 12 years. And you don't just get to walk into the 13 jersey when you haven't played there all season. And Len Ikitau is genuinely a world-class 13, one of the top 5 13s in the world, in my opinion. And he should play that position. And I'm not saying that Hunter Paisami, pound for pound, game by game, play by play, is better than Suaalii as an athlete, but he has played almost 30 caps at around inside or outside center, and he is a physical specimen that has a kick, run, pass game now that's been worked over several years. He's a fair few years older than Suaalii. Paisami was not the complete athlete back when he was 20, however old Suaalii is, 21, 22. Yep. And so it's just one of those things where I get that we have to play Suaalii because he's such a raw athletic specimen. But you put him in that 23 jersey, and I promise you, you get more value out of him coming off the bench later. And I said this before the series. It's just one of those things when you start looking at his stats, when you're tackling at 76.9%, but so many of the issues around his defense was him not even being near the player that he needed to tackle.
Yeah, correct.
It's not him actually, it's not his poor tackling technique or that he's missing tackles, but he is longer than his body's length. He's 196 centimeters away from where he needs to be. And it's often because he got in front of Len Ikitau as a defender. That's when you get turned inside out, particularly defending at 13. And that's why you see Len Ikitau, often when he goes back into the Brumbies for the first couple of games, he's often too far behind Ollie Sapsford or David Feluai, because at the Brumbies now under Ben Moen, they run a rush defense, but he's still in the Wallabies mindset with Laurie Fisher, who he played lots of years under at the Brumbies, running a connected line. So it's just, for him, he takes a little bit of time to rewire, but he's so good in that space. And if you're running that kind of defense, don't move your defensive general, who actually does everything based off his own bat, who we all know says very little during the game. We've heard it from Suaalii, we've heard it from Paisami, we've heard it from Joe Schmidt. But then you put someone like Hunter, who's had to be outside Tom Liner, a young fly half who's had to command games, and he's had so many games in the 12 jersey for the Wallabies comparatively. Who else is playing there? So it just felt like for Suaalii last night, yeah, sure, his run meters are pretty good. 29 post-contact, 29 meters ball carrying. That's from 8 runs. But you take away that one break that he made, where he's beaten a total of 4 defenders and made the 1 line break, that stat becomes quite limited and quite muted. So, again, I'm not saying this because I'm an anti-Suaalii person. I really like him, and I'm so stoked that he's in the team.
Hate him.
But we have to be realistic, and heading into the TRC first up against South Africa, if you put him up against Damien Diolande and Jesse Creel, who are like the best center combination in the world, he is going to get annihilated. And from a physical aspect, he's not going to dominate them either. It is going to be pound for pound the biggest challenge he's ever faced. So it's just putting this game and last game defensively, particularly in like a box. You get quite nervous about what other teams are going to look to do, because now they have a lot of tape on him as well.
I just don't see RA putting him on the bench when they're paying $1 million a season for him.
Put him on a wing. Just wing.
Exactly.
Put him in 11.
Shift him somewhere else, but I don't think they'll put him on the bench, particularly not.
And have him as a utility cover, as in he's a winger who can cover 13 if need be, due to injury. So like he understands that he's had some experience, uses that. Look, can I just quickly shift things to a broader discussion about this, because I recognise that we could very easily have the accusation leveled against us of like whinging Aussies, not recognising kind of the
we'll get
full
them.
scope of the
They'll
game.
come. Don't worry. They'll come.
It'll come anyway.
It'll come.
The reason why the Wallabies lost is not inherently due just to these individual performances. It's due to moments like the tail end of the second half in the last 6 minutes. Tail end of the first half. Last 6 minutes, we let in 2 tries. So you got Tom Curry and Hugh Jones scoring tries in the 34th and 37th minutes. So we go from 23-5 to 23-17 going into the half within the space of 7 minutes. And it's moments like that where our defense was just way too shoddy, where we were not as resilient as we need to be in big moments of big matches like this that show where work still needs to be done. We can do the attack. Give us front foot ball through our big ball players, and our attack shines. Like some of the tries to Jake Gordon and Tom Wright, they were just incredible. Absolute spectacles that anybody watching the game, even if they weren't the biggest fans of Union, are getting up out of their seats and cheering and saying, now this is what the game could be. Like brilliant, brilliant stuff. But where the Wallabies still need to be improving and where they genuinely lost this game, tail end of the first half.
Yep.
Like, don't let in those 2 tries. Don't concede those 12 points, which were on the back of errors that the Wallabies had been making to gift field position to the Lions. Then the outcome is entirely different. And so I think that there's a broader discussion that needs to be had about just consistency of defensive effort for the Wallabies and being a good enough team that we're not making those poor decisions, because we had the Lions rattled in the first half. Kicks out on the full, off multiple dropped balls, just they were not performing at their best, and we let them back into the game.
Absolutely. I will say, just on that point, I think the Wallabies' opening 30 minutes were really good, and defensive effort was a lot faster than last week. Like, it was commented a few times by the commentators on the sideline that the Wallabies players, and particularly our big boys like Skelton and Valetini, weren't spending 30 seconds on the ground to get back into play. They'd make a tackle, they get straight back to their feet and get in the defensive line. And I think that's what wore us out in that last, the championship minutes that we always talk about, 5 minutes before halftime and 5 minutes after halftime. They were fatigued. And those guys, they've had weeks off. They've not played. They've been injured. That's where they fell off, and they allowed the Lions back into the game.
Yeah, no, I think you both raise really good points. I'm just going to take it again to an aspect of now shifting a bit to the Lions' focus. Their accuracy and ability to be clinical in the 22 was some of the best I've seen at test level in quite some time. They entered, they got a line out, and how they got that line out is because Finn Russell was hoofing it 60 meters on the fly into touch from penalties that they were conceding in their own half. They don't win that game without Finn Russell. He is one of the top 3 fly halves in the world, and his ability to control, to stay calm, and to also nail those kicks, and to be able to do it quickly. Had Max Jorgensen been back where he should have been, had a kicker been more complacent, he could have plucked that ball, one of those balls out of the air without even jumping, and just put it in and then be able to kick it back. But it is the speed that we saw Finn Russell take a tap against the Western Force and score that try. It's just because of his quick thinking. And that's the trade-off that you get from someone like a Finn Smith or an Owen Farrell, who are system-based, who are playing the odds, playing the numbers. You get eyes up rugby with Finn Russell. And I have been so stoked to see him play in Australia. Yep. And he is just a marvel to watch. He is not a maverick. He is just an elite operator that understands the game of rugby at a very, very profound, deep level. So without Finn Russell, I'm going to say that they find that game really hard to win because no one is kicking the ball like he was that day, on that day. Subsequently, because their entries were so solid and because Australia had only really Nick Frost in the second row for the first half in particular, and that's what those the 2 tries that you referenced just before halftime there, Mitch. The Wallabies couldn't compete with them defensively, and our defense let us down. But that's when the Wallabies needed to have 2 options at the lineup to genuinely compete, to try to get rid of the ball to rid the British and Irish Lions of the ball before it even gets to their back line.
Yeah.
Because we were porous in defense. We were poor. The Lions were great in attack. And out wide, they managed to just chew meters with someone like Tommy Freeman, who I thought has been pretty average in the test so far, along with James Lowe, both wingers quite poor if you compare them to Harry Potter and Max Jorgensen, and also Tate McDermott. We'll get to him in a second. But that is just something that you got to stop it at the source. And I think that 22-meter entry point, we scored 4 points per entry. They scored 4.1. But you look at where we scored our tries from 60 meters out, they just got down to the 22 and ground us down and scored. And it was too easy. I don't know, Ando, maybe that's being a bit too harsh, but it was just so clinical, and it looked almost inevitable every time they got into our 22.
Yeah, it was just too easy. The tries at the end of the first half were just too easy. And if we want to beat the Lions, we need to prevent those types of tries from going in. Really, really significant. One quick thing I'll say before I then throw it over to Mitch. I thought the Dan Sheehan try in the 15th minute is just worthy of comment.
Yep.
I don't think it is anywhere near as controversial as the final call. But what essentially happens, for those of you who don't remember, the Lions get they get a penalty, and they're kind of very, very close to our try line. They decide to take the quick tap. Dan Sheehan taps it. And then because the two Wallabies defenders, I think it's a couple of props, they are aiming to cut him down, to tackle low, to get him to the ground, stop him from getting over. He jumps over them and scores the try. Now, that one's really, really interesting, because you could justifiably say that he's just dived for the line, which you're allowed to do, and scored the try. And that's fine. But at the same time, he's clearly intentionally jumped over the tackling players.
Yeah.
He has. You can't deny that.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, Wayne Barnes has actually cleared this up on X. So he sent out a justification that came out in 2022. New Zealand Rugby sent a clarification response to the officials of World Rugby around this exact thing. And the clarification is that you can dive or jump to score a try, but you cannot jump or dive to avoid a tackle. So in this instance,
he's avoiding a tackle to score a try. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
The instance is if you're running to, you're running down the field and you dive to score a try in the corner as a winger, that's fine. Because you're in the act of trying to score the try. But if you're jumping to avoid a tackle, which what he does, he jumps over two defenders, that should not be a try, because there's legally no way that they can stop. He's landed in the try line and scored the try. He wasn't jumping to score the try. He was jumping to avoid the tacklers.
Yeah, it's an interesting grey area, isn't it? Because alternatively, you could argue that he is diving to score a try. Just in the act of doing so, he jumps over some players.
But he jumps over a ruck, or he jumps.
Yeah. Well, no, there's not a ruck formed yet.
I know there's not, but I'm saying in that instance, it's similar to jumping over a ruck. There's no legal way to stop him from scoring that try.
Yeah, which Joe Schmidt mentioned in the post-match presser.
You've tackled him in the air. It's a penalty against you. It's potentially a card. It's potentially a penalty try.
And he's probably leading with his head as well. And so what are you meant to do to stop him?
You can't dive over someone to score a try. You can dive to score a try, but you can't dive to avoid the tackle. So in my mind, it should have been scrubbed off.
Yeah, interesting. I can see why it remained, but it's definitely one of those ones that's a kind of a grey area that's easier to decide upon the day after the event. Yeah. Mitch, you wanted to make a comment on kicking?
Yeah, so one of the things that John and Lockie touched on in their preview podcast a few days ago in the lead up to this one was around the Lions' kick tactics and the Wallabies, kick receipt. And one of the things that you spoke about, John, was around making sure Tom Liner wasn't the guy that was taking the kick receipts. Didn't happen. Joe Schmidt didn't listen. Tom Liner...
Listen to the pod, Joe.
Come on. Bro, Joe, just do yourself a favour, bro.
What's going on?
Yeah, I think you've got to put the 10 somewhere if you're not putting him in the front line. And as we've seen, Noel Oseo's often filled that line, and I think he's actually become quite good at taking the high ball like that. I'm not saying Tom Liner was poor, but by putting him there, you prevent Tom Wright from catching the ball. And we saw Tom Wright actually come into this game really nicely. We talked about in the review last week how Tom Wright was taken out of the game. And he put himself back in the game because he did take more kick receipts. He did choose to run the ball. One or two occasions, perhaps it wasn't the absolute right call, but I thought that overall, what he decided to do often put the Wallabies on the front foot, whether it was to kick, whether it was to run. So I thought that he was quite good, but the kicking from the Wallabies was really good last night. I thought that they put the right amount of box kicks up. I thought that they chased them really well. I think there was one or two moments they probably could have got a better shot on the Lions player that received it. But overall, I thought we actually got the balance pretty well right. And, you know, without having, and this is not to blame Tate McDermott, because I thought he had a tremendous game on the wing, managed to bump Jack Conan. It's not every day a number 9 bumps a number 8.
Yeah.
But he, nonetheless, you don't really want to kick to Tate McDermott because he is quite short. And with the powerful and big James Lowe and Tommy Freeman, who he's marking, it just becomes, you just do the maths and you're like, is it worth the risk? Put the ball in his hand, he does really well. Tremendous player who came through some of the sevens programs early in his days. Really, really good player with a lot of game knowledge. But yeah, it just, that obviously altered the way that we kicked the ball. And I think that Jake Gordon actually actively avoided kicking on that side of the field, box kick specifically. And that kind of hurt the way that we decided to run the ball. Because I think on a couple of occasions there, we got pinged at the breakdown because I think we took one or two too many rucks to try to get from the left side to the right side. So yeah, I think that's the quick comment on the kicking. And I just think Finn Russell was excellent. I actually think Jamieson Gibson Park didn't have a tremendous game. So yeah, that's that one for me.
All right, sorry, team. I've got to run.
Ando.
Love your work.
Great
But
to have you
I'll
back
catch you
on.
later.
All right.
Cheers, thank you, mate.
Thank you.
John, I've got 2 extra points I wanted to talk about before we finish
Great.
the pod. So the first one is around selections this week and, you know, our combinations that we had and the bench strategy. And then I want to get your thoughts on who Joe Schmidt adds for the decider, or it's not no longer the decider, for the third test next week in Sydney. So just around the first point around the squad that Joe Schmidt did select in the 23. Obviously, you're not really going to plan for individual injuries. And I think that that hamstring injury to Harry Potter, that hurt the Wallabies, and it hurt when it happened. But I mean, I sit here and I feel like there was a missed opportunity from Joe Schmidt to not have James O'Connor somewhere in that, 22-23 jersey.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolutely great point. Just like they brought Owen Farrell on, it would have been pretty cool to see James O'Connor and Owen Farrell go up against each other just for the plot, just for the lore, really. I think that obviously they went with the 6-2 split. Donaldson and McDermott much more versatile, perhaps, together as a unit. But obviously James O'Connor probably one of the most versatile players that you can have there. But again, someone who hasn't been necessarily part of the ecosystem for a long time. So I guess that's the call that he went with there. This weekend, you probably stick with a 6-2 split bench, if I'm honest. I think that if you have... So, yeah, 6-2 bench split, let's go with the players that I'd say that you'd go with, provided that everyone's healthy, because I think there were some concerns about Alan Alatoa and James Slipper. Not necessarily great big concerns, but nonetheless, they were subbed off very early. And so, provided everyone's healthy, you probably bring Taniela Tupou back because you saw that Tom Robertson got quite demolished at scrum time. And I just want to tip my cap to Ellis Genge, particularly, who really took him to town in the second half.
Just make sure next week, Genji, get that elbow up. Come on.
Or not, and let him get pinged by Amash.
Well, they're not pinging it, so get your elbow up, scrum.
Yeah. So I think Tupou did enough in the first night. Not did enough. Actually, I think he had a... Sorry, that's such a bland way to put it. I think he was really impressive, full of running, and really good energy in the First Nations of Pacifica game against the British and Irish Lions last Tuesday. So definitely think that he should get a shot off the bench. I think that if Slipper and Alatoa are fit, why change it if it's broke? They did so well in both tests. They were really impressive. I'd say they went up another level in this game that they did compared to number 1, even though they were very good into test 1. And then I thought Dave Parecki was really good, so I don't think I'd change the status quo necessarily there. I thought Billy Pollard was good without being great off the bench, unlike he was the week prior, but that's just the way that you get with athletes sometimes. And then you probably keep the second row combination of Skelton and Frost, and you put Lukan Salakaia-Loto on the bench to then come on for Skelton to make sure that we have that physical edge and that ballast at scrum time, particularly, and that extra line-out option in the second half, which is so crucial. And then, if I'm honest, you probably put, if you, and this is where it's controversial, I would have loved to got Ando's take on it. I think you actually, and I know we've been searching for a captain, but Joe Schmidt hasn't made Harry Wilson captain, so therefore he's fair game. And I think that you drop him out of the starting side, you put Valetini to 8, and you put Tom Hooper to 6, or Nick Champion to Crepney. I am a huge advocate for having players that are performing well in the side. And I am sorry, but Harry Wilson, despite him being such an admirable leader and have been giving so much openness and pride and earnesty to the jersey and to the public, especially after last night's loss, he has not been performing. And I don't think if you're not labeled as the captain to the public, you're fair game. So I think that he needs a rest one way or the other. Maybe it's big minutes during Super Rugby that's really scuppered him of energy in the back half here of the season, because he played 80 last night. He was cramping, and he just has not been performing, unfortunately, in the last 3 games.
What do you think about Gleeson at 8, Valetini at 6, with Fraser at 7?
I think you lose too much height at line-out time,
Right.
particularly with Skelton. You need that extra body, and particularly and the reason why I throw up Nick Champion to Crepney, although he's a defensive player, as you and I have talked about, and I've talked about with Lockie before, his defensive stats far outweigh his offensive stats. He doesn't necessarily go backwards in contact, and we've seen that against the Lions now with the Western Force. With the Western Force, and against the Lions in Test 1. And he's also really quick off the ground at the line out. He's really good in that space. So I think that's where they are the ticks in his ledger. But Tom Hooper, again, a little bit taller again, and obviously has a different type of game. He's a much more offensively orientated, and he's definitely very quick off the line in defense as well. So that's where those are the changes that I'd see in the pack on the starting side and on the bench. And if I'm honest, Carlo Tizzano, again, very unlucky to not get a start, but I think Fraser has been doing just enough to retain his spot. Especially, he had a good game in Test 1. I think he had an okay game last night or Saturday night on Game 2. They're the changes I'd make in the pack. Are you seeing any other changes, or would you make any other changes?
I think what's going to be really interesting this week is which way. There's 2 options that Joe Schmidt has now. It's whether you go all in to try and win the third test and not make it a 3-0 series loss, or do you look to the future and sort of look towards the Rugby Championship and give guys opportunities? Now, I think Joe Schmidt goes with that first option. I think that he brings a few guys in that he's identified that will add to the game plan, give us that go-forward ball like we had in the first half. But you very well could see him, look towards the future and bring in Carlo Tizzano for a start, bring in Champion de Crepney, like you said, and see what these guys deliver. Bring in James O'Connor onto the bench to see if he's going to bring anything in that 23 jersey, so that if we get into the Rugby Championships deep and we get a few injuries, Joe Schmidt knows whether he can call on these guys to do him a job or not. I think he'll go that first way. So I think, like you were saying, I think that he'll, have a fairly similar side with maybe a few personnel changes. But he very well could, bring Lukan in to start. He could bring in Taniela Tupou to start, to just try and get that scoreline. Like the Wallabies this week, they got 23 points, in the first half. Realistically, they probably needed to score somewhere up between 33 to 35 points in that first half to stop the Lions coming back. And, that's a tactic that they might use in this second half, this third game. They could just try and smash them early, score a heap of points, and then try and ride out that second half. It could go either way. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think thinking of the future right now is a bit premature. So that's why I think, as you've already said, I think they'd go with number 1 and option number 1 and really consolidate and improve the side as he did from Test 1 to Test 2 and then into Test 3. I think in the back line, I was very impressed with Tom Liner last night. I thought he stepped up incredibly well from how he was in Test 1. He wasn't bad in Test 1, but I think he made notable impacts on this game, and I thought he was really, really solid. So we didn't lose the game because of that, and he kicked off the tee very well, which was crucial. Obviously, had he nailed those 2 conversions from the tries earlier, the try wouldn't have been enough, and that last conversion goal would have been crucial, but that's not why we lost the game. It's just worth noting that he wasn't perfect off the tee. I think you keep that combination. Honestly, I don't see why you would remove that combination from Gordon and Liner, and then maybe Liner stays on and plays the second half with Tate McDermott, and you give that combo the second half. In the centers, like I mentioned, you put Paisami at 12, you put Lenny Kitau at 13, and if the people want Joseph Suaalii on the field in the 15, you put him on the sting, and then instead of Harry Potter, now that has opened. But in all honesty, I think he should be put in the 23 jersey, and you give Dylan Peach that number 11 jersey or the 14 jersey, whichever one Harry Potter was wearing last night. Forgive me for not remembering that
11, I think.
Clearly. And then on the bench, like you said, maybe it's time for James O'Connor. I think it would be a shame for him not to get to play the Lions. That would be a really big shame for him. So I kind of want to see him for the storyline. And I'm not entirely sure that I think Donaldson does deserve to play necessarily ahead of James O'Connor. So I think I'll reserve judgment on that. But I think for the plot, it would definitely be pretty interesting if James O'Connor got that spot in the last game.
Yeah, there's a heap of storylines coming out of this next week. It's going to be really interesting to see what team gets named on Thursday, what the prep is, what comes out. Like if World Rugby does come out with something around these decisions that were made, whether they clarify it or not. I know that Nigel Owens is doing a little bit on social media for Whistle Watch, and he's been very supportive of the referees so far. So no doubt he'll support them in these decisions. But if he goes the other way, there's going to be uproar. So there's a lot of stories to come this week. I don't think this is the last we've heard of these decisions and this penalty, no penalty call in that last ruck.
No.
But it's definitely one that we'll be talking about for years to come. Is there an asterisk on the end of this Lions tour? Should the Wallabies win the 3rd test? Who knows? Who knows? It's
Mitch, can we just spend just 2 minutes each roughly just talking about the Lions plays that impressed you? Because I know that it's painful, but I think we do have to, and at least off the ruck, we try to keep things balanced and analytical. And I know that you guys as Scrumbags go very hard on the sleeve, and I love that about you. That's why the punters listen and enjoy your content. But Tyg Byrne was someone who was heavily scrutinized before the test series started. He was tremendous last week, and he was again one of the leading players for the Lions. And I just think that blue scrum cap, whatever the Wallabies was going wrong for the Wallabies, it was because Tyg Byrne was being so phenomenal, whether it was being strong in the tackle, whether it was giving them a bit of impetus with ball in hand, or just being a genuine ruck fiend. I think that he, along with Itoje, for whatever people say about him in regards to how he handled the referee, he was a line-out general, worked tirelessly, and also flirted with danger in and around the breakdown, and he often got away with everything that he did, and that's what a great player does. That's what Richard McCaw did for so long, and Itoje is epic on the ball. So as far as the second rowers and the back row go, Jack Conan was pretty good as well, but particularly Byrne and Itoje I thought were immense. And then obviously I've got to give it to the front row, starting and reserve of the British and Irish Lions, because I thought that they really muscled up from last week. And I was very, very impressed, as hard as it is for me to admit it, at how that unit worked their way through a game in where they didn't actually have the go forward in the forward pack. So did you have any quick picks from the forwards in the Lions?
Yeah, Tom Curry, again, like we called him out in the second game. He had an awesome first test, but he carried that out in the second test as well. Again, another pest in the Wallabies side. Every single time they did something like Byrne, he was there. He scored that try that got them back into the contest, and he's just had a really good series. Like he's put his hand up, and he's probably grown in selection and at least in Lions kind of selection criteria. He's grown way up that list as one of the first selected.
No, totally. And then in the back line, already touched on Finn Russell, how tremendous his running game, as in running the team and organizing the team and picking when to kick, and particularly the length of his touch finders and his accuracy to touch finders, I'm not sure the Lions win that game without Finn Russell being in that kind of vintage form. He was tremendous. But then the guy outside of him, Bundy Aki, I think that he did what he needed to do. A bit of an understated performance, but he got them rolling forward with the meters. He managed to make the post-contact meters. He managed to make the gain line. He had 6 carries for 20 meters for what I'm looking at here to be 27 post-contact meters. And they were up the guts. You're going through the likes of Leniki Tau there. You're going through the likes of Fraser McRae close to the ruck. That is a really, really difficult job to have. And if I'm honest, that is exactly the kind of player that the Lions needed last night, particularly when they were going backwards. And I'm unsure Sione Tuipulotu would have been that kind of player for them because he is a bit more of a nuanced player with great footwork and great distribution skills. Whereas even Dan Bigger said it in pre-match coverage, Bundy Aki is a bit more north-south as opposed to how skillful Sione Tuipulotu is. So really, really good there. Again, not tremendously impressed with the back three of the Lions. And I think that, again, we had the wood over there. But nonetheless, they have great stocks to come back from injury for Test 3, should they make it back, in Mac Hansen and obviously Darcy Graham, who is a whippet or a greyhound of an athlete, extremely quick, probably can compete with Corey Toole, which is someone that perhaps Joe Schmidt feels he can afford to have a punt on. And I would love to see an out-and-out race between Darcy Graham and Corey Toole because I think that those two would light up the Accor Stadium there in Sydney next week.
Yeah, for sure. I've also got to just shout out Hugh Jones. I thought he's been really good in that centres this series. And the one guy that Andy Farrell has been consistently choosing. So, we've seen Bundy Aki and Sione Tuipulotu come in and out of the Test side. But Hugh Jones has been that one there that's steadied the ship and not always been outstanding, but he's been solid, and that's what they need.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. The Lions are such a great side, and they have so much depth, and I envy it. But obviously, they're 4 nations put into one, and I'm very proud of the Australians. But nonetheless, it was a great spectacle of how to play Test match rugby, and to be a side that has only played together for just over a month now. It is a tremendous effort from the British and Irish Lions. And I just want to say that it's been an absolute privilege to have them in Australia. And I can't wait to watch them in the flesh this weekend coming up in Sydney. It is going to be absolutely awesome. I want everyone to get out amongst the pubs, get amongst the people, enjoy the rugby, breathe it in, sing the songs, get amongst it, chant the Wallabies on, wear your gold throughout the week so that they know that they're in the heartland, one of the heartlands of rugby in Australia. But if you're in Sydney, that is for the game. And I think that you and I are both just hoping that Wallabies can sit with this loss today. We're recording on Sunday. We'll probably go out on Monday. And then to be able to then say, well, we still have one job to do. And as Harry Wilson, who's a very, very, very honourable and humble captain, said, it's an honour and a privilege every time you pull on the jersey. So I have no doubt that the boys are going to get back up. But right now, it's raw. You're feeling it. Review Monday. You get back into the week.
That's right. Yeah, I think just all the talk, just take our minds back 18 months when all the English pundits are talking about, do we go to Australia for this Lions series? What's the point? It's going to be 3-0. It's not going to be competitive at all. The Wallabies showed up where it mattered. And
Absolutely.
They led for 79 minutes. It's a referee's decision in it whether they get the win or not. So, yes, the Lions have been good, but the Wallabies probably deserve to win that game out of the two teams that were playing. And so that's the one thing that the Wallabies fans should be clinging on to this week. That, yes, the series isn't there for the taking anymore, but next week is going to be do or die anyway. Let's stop history. Let's not let the Lions go 3-0 for the first time in the professional era. And the Wallabies don't want to do that. Get there to Accor Stadium, wear your gold, show up, because the Wallabies put in a performance, particularly in that first half, that we should, as Wallabies and Australian rugby fans, be proud of. So get behind this team because it's only up from here.
Yep. No, I'm in agreement with you, Mitch.
I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did having the chat with the guys. Obviously, couldn't touch on absolutely everything, but I think in the post mortem, in the aftermath, we just need to hit the key points. And I think that everyone see that there's certain changes that need to be made on the bench, but we'll get into more predicting what the side's going to be like later in the week as well. Again, guys, just reminding you guys to like and subscribe, because that's the way that you support the channel if you do get value from it. So please do that. Otherwise, you enjoy the start of the week to the best as you can as a Wallaby supporter. If you're a Lion supporter, congratulations. Enjoy the travelling. Later in the week, we're talking about some pubs and clubs that you can visit in Sydney, as well as obviously all the rugby analysis and analytics that you guys expect from the channel and from me. Also, head to Rugby Pass, where I am a columnist, and I'll be doing a written piece on the Wallabies defence and how it needs to change in order to be able to progress through to 2025 and make sure that we have the best results that we can. So until then, try to enjoy the week, and more rugby coming at you. As always, ciao.